So let's do something that's a little bit more complicated than the previous little 4 plus 6 thing that we wrote up, right? Let's say you had something. So what you have here is two terms, and what you're trying to do is find a pattern between each one and take that out. Find something similar between each of them and take that, factor that out to the front. That's called the GCF, greatest common factor. So what you would do here is you have a 24 and a 16. Now I'm going to break one more of these things down to their prime numbers. Actually, we're not even going to bother. 24, 16. What's similar between these two numbers, right? If you look at this, 8 goes into this. That's the highest number that goes into both of those terms. You can take out a 12 out of this, but you can't take out a 12 out of this. You can take a 24 out of this, but you can't take a 24 out of that. So the biggest number that you can take out of both these numbers, 24 and 16, is 8. So you can take an 8 out of both of these, right? So what you can do is, I usually end up writing it like this. That way I can put whatever's similar between them in here, and then we'll figure out what's left over. So from 24 and 16, you can take out an 8, so an 8 comes out, right? If you want, you can write down what's left over after you take the 8 out, right? So if you took an 8 out of 24, you have 3 left here. Put your plus sign here, leave enough room for these guys if you're going to have any of these guys left in there. But let's put this in the middle, right? 8 out of 16 is going to be 2, right? So this is basically the principle, right? If you brought the 8 in, multiplied it here, this would go in and multiply this guy, and you would get back your original 24 and 16, right? You're taking out the GCF. Over here, now you're done with the numbers. Now let's go to the next letter. You have an A here, you have an A here. So you can take out an A from both of them. So an A comes out. You don't need anything here because you only needed an A there and you have an A here already. So you've already taken out the greatest common factor from these guys, nothing left over. You have a B squared here and a B cubed here. B squared means there's 2 B's. B cubed means there's 3 B's. So what you can do is take out 2 B's from both of them. Now you couldn't take out a B cubed because this doesn't have 3 B's to be taken out. So what you do is you go B squared comes out, right? Now you don't have any more B's here. You needed a B squared and you got a B squared here because when this guy goes in and multiplies this guy, you're going to get 8 times 3 is 24, AB squared, right? Over here you had a B cubed, you have a B squared here, so all you need is another B, one more B. Right? Now obviously we left too much space between these guys. So what you would do is just go 8AB squared 3 plus 2B. And this is this guy factored. You just took out the GCF from this guy and you ended up with this. Okay? GCF is something that you're going to use all the time throughout your, math experience, if you want to call it. So it's something that you really need to learn. So when it comes to quadratic equations, let's say you had something like this. If they ask you to factor this, what you're doing is again, you're looking to see what's similar between these two terms here to take it out to the front and turn it into two things, two terms multiplied together. Now what's similar between 2 and 8 is a 2, right? So you can take out a 2. What's similar between x squared and x? There's an x there and 2 x's here, so you can take out a maximum of 1x, right? So an x comes out, right? Now what you have left here is, the way you should think about it is, what do you multiply 2x by to give you 2x squared? And that's just an x, right? Because 2x times x gives you 2x squared. What do you multiply 2x by to give you 8x? Well, you multiply it by 4. So that becomes 4. And this is this guy factored. And where this becomes useful is if they give you, like for example, if you had it like this, all they would be saying is, factor this expression. And this is really an expression, it's not an equation because there is no equal sign in there, right? What they would do is just say factor this. But what they could do and what, the way you work towards functions, where we're going to go is working towards functions, is you would have an f of x here if it was a function. When it comes to solving equations, what they would do is just say add equals to 0 here and say, solve this equation. And to solve this equation, what we're going to do is use the property of 0, where if you know, right now we can't solve this equation because x squared and x, you know, you can't combine them, you can't add them if you remember your exponents and radicals. So we need a new technique to be able to solve this, and that's called factoring, GCF, right? And what we're going to do is use the property of 0 where it says the only way you can have something, multiple things, you know, things multiplied together to give you 0 is if at least one of them is equal to 0. So if they said solve for this, right, they would say solve for this, and this would be equal to 0. What we're going to do is break this into, you know, things multiplied together to give you 0. That way you can set each one equal to 0. And that's exactly what we have here. We've got two things multiplied together to give you 0. So what you can do is set each one of these equal to 0. So what you would do, you go 2x is equal to 0, right? Then you go x plus 4 is equal to 0. And then you would just solve for this. For this, you would just divide by 2. So this would be x is equal to 0. And for this, you just move the 4 over, and it would be x is equal to negative 4. And those are your solutions. And as we talked about before, those are your x-intercepts for a parabola. So we've got 9x squared over 16 plus 3x cubed over 28. And again, if there was no equal sign here, they would just say factor this expression. But what we're going to do is continuously add the equal sign because, you know, it's one step more complicated than this. So what we're going to do is just try to solve the equations right away. So we're just going to add 0. So what you would do is, I mean, this doesn't change anything, right? You have a fraction compared to where we didn't have fractions. We just had straight up, you know, numerator type of problems. We had something like this, right? With fractions, it works the same way. If you're taking out a GCF, whatever's in the denominator stays in the denominator. So what you're going to do here is take out the GCF for each one of these terms. You got a 9 and you have a 3. So what's the GCF? What's the common greatest common factor between 9 and 3? Well, that's just straight up 3, right? So let's put our brackets. Let's put our thing here. So you take out a 3 from here, you took out a 3 from here. You have an x squared here, you have an x cubed. So you can take out an x squared. Now what you're going to do is just go into the denominator. You took out whatever you could from the numerators, right? What you're going to do is look at 16 and 28. Now, what's the GCF out of these? 2 goes into 16, you got an 8 left. 2 goes into 28, you got a 14 left. But that's not the complete GCF because you can take out another 2. So the GCF from 16 is going to be 16 and 28 is going to be 4. So you're going to take out a 4 from this, and you're going to take out a 4 from this. Is the GCF from both of those terms. So what you're going to do now is figure out what's left over after you take this out. Now, again, the way I think about it is I always go back to this and I go, what do I need to put here and what am I going to multiply this guy by to give me back this? Okay, so we have 3x squared here, we got 9x squared here. What do you multiply 3x squared by to give you 9x squared? That's just straight up 3 because we already got all the x's that we need. So there's going to be 3 going here. With the denominator, what do you multiply 4 by to give you 16? That's just 4. You have plus. And what do you multiply 3x squared by to give you 3x cubed? Well, you need another x because this is x squared. You need x cubed, right? And what do you multiply 4 by to give you 28? That's just 7. And that is this guy factored. Now what we had was this guy equaling 0, right? unfortunately 0 is not coming up, but there's a 0 there, equals to 0. So all you do is you set each one of these terms equal to 0 and solve for the x. So what you're going to have here is, you're going to have 3x squared over 4 is equal to 0, right? And over here, you're going to have 3/4 plus x over 7 is equal to 0. And these two, the solutions for these is going to be the solution for this. Now, I've ran out of room. This one's just going to be straightforward. You cross multiply the 4 up. 4 times 0 is 0.